The start of drawdown of British troops from Germany has been confirmed today. The Ministry of Defence has told about 1,800 soldiers that they'll be moving to bases in the UK over the next few years, starting in January. Last year's Defence Review set a target of bringing half of Britain's 20,000 soldiers back from Germany by 2015, with the remainder by 2020. In a moment, we'll have reaction from Germany, Cyprus and from RAF Cottesmore, which is being turned into an army base. But first, James Hurst has the detail behind the first tranche of Project Avanti.
The British Army has had a strong presence around the Rhine since 1945. They were stationed in Germany to help ensure a lasting peace after World War II, a role that evolved into being ready to respond if the Cold War ever heated up into real fighting. Today's announcement marks the beginning of the end of an era, which by the time it finally closes will have spanned 3/4 of a century.
Once the war came down, once communism collapsed, British forces moved further east than they'd ever been before, training in Hungary, for example, in Poland, Czechoslovakia. And so, although it's an end of an era as an encampment, as a Raj, it is not an end of an era of the British forces actually in continental Europe.
The first move will be in January, when 43 Close Support Squadron Royal Logistic Corps leave Cottesmore for Abingdon. 2 Royal Anglian, who are currently in Cyprus, won't return to Celle in July next year, but instead move to RAF Cottesmore. A year later, 7 Regiment Royal Logistic Corps will relocate from Bielefeld also to Cottesmore. And 2 Yorks will also come back to Britain in summer 2013. When their tour of Cyprus ends, they'll be based at Purbright Barracks instead of Munster. It means Trenchard Barracks in Celle and Munster Station will be handed back to the German government, and the closure of Rheindahlen can be completed. Today's announcement totals 1,800 people due back to Britain by the middle of 2013. Well, that's still just under a fifth of the 10,000 who are supposed to return home by 2015. The Chief of Defence Staff has previously admitted it is a challenging target. There are all sorts of things like accommodation to be sorted out to meet it. But the Army says today there will be many more such announcements, and the plan remains half home from Germany by 2015 and all back by 2020. There are also changes announced in the UK today. 39 Engineer Regiment will leave Waterbeach next summer and move to Kinloss in Scotland, taking the Army there earlier than previously planned. Headquarters elements of 2 Air Support Engineer Group will also leave Waterbeach for RAF Wittering a year later. That will enable the total closure of Waterbeach Barracks. James Hurst, Forces News, Westminster.
In Cyprus, soldiers from 2 Royal Anglian, the poachers, have broadly welcomed the news they'll be returning to home pastures. For some, RAF Cottesmore is very close to home. Kath Brazier reports from Decalia.
Corporal Ian Smedley's been with 2 Royal Anglian for 20 years. In that time, he's lived in Germany twice, and this is also his second tour to Cyprus. But all that time, he's kept in touch with news from home in Melton Mowbray. With his hometown being only 9 miles from Cottesmore, this is one corporal happy with today's announcement.
For my sister, it'll be a case of the babysitter's home. But for the family and friends, they're pro-military anyway, especially around the area that I'm from. We've got the Defence Animal Centre. And the local community have supported us really well on homecoming parades, and now it's our turn to go back and say thank you to the community.
Rutland and its surrounding area of Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Northamptonshire is the Royal Anglian Regiment's main recruiting patch. Until recently, RAF Cottesmore housed the Harrier jets, but next year it'll be turned into an army garrison.
We were aware that we were due to go back to Purbright near Woking. That's great news, and the families were looking forward to going back to the United Kingdom. To then be told we're going to Cottesmore as a result of these recent changes is the icing on the cake.
The battalion numbers 600 soldiers. Add to that their partners and children, and the unit welfare department have quite a task on their hands.
We're going back at the end of this month to start the first of many recce's back to the UK and Cottesmore, and we'll come back and we'll start the briefing process and start really from there. 2
Royal Anglian leave Cyprus in late summer 2012. They were last based on UK soil at Turnhill in Shropshire in 2007. Corporal Smedley, his family and his friends have welcomed the news that after 5 years abroad, the poachers are moving back to their heartland. Kath Brazier, Forces News, Decalia.
There's little surprise in BFG at today's announcement. If anything, families in Germany were expecting more moves before 2015. Rob Olver reports from Rheindahlen.
The Bulletin is Rhine Garrison's monthly magazine. The staff are all military community wives. Today, as they discussed what to put in their Christmas edition, thoughts turned to the announcement confirming the end of their Rheindalen military complex workplace by 2014.
We have a genuinely wonderful relationship with the local community, and I do think they'll miss having the British here.
Most people in the RMC will be happy now that they have a definite end date.
I've got a lot of fond memories of living here, and I feel it's a shame that future generations of army children and wives, families, won't have that experience.
Today also confirms well-established plans to close barracks in Celle and Munster. For the rest of the military community in Germany, there's now breathing space.
For families who are stationed in Hona, Hereford, Paderborn, Gütersloh, they have a little bit more time just to get used to the fact they will be in Germany, and then they won't be moving until 2013-14 and further on from there.
But for the forces in Germany, the main story today is that the target of a 50% troop pullout by 2015 may slip. Privately, senior officers say that, unlike here in Germany, there's no suitable accommodation at the moment in Britain. And then there's the cost of moving there. As one put it to me this week, if we had all the cash, the barracks and the housing, we could move all the troops out of Germany within 6 months. Rob Olver, Forces News, Rheindalen.
Earlier, our reporter James Hurst interviewed Major General Nick Pope, spokesman for the Chief of the Defence Staff. He began by asking him what practical support will be available to those rebasing.
Every support that they would normally expect to get. Our army is an army that moves regularly. I've just moved for the 28th time during my 30-year military career, but it's part of our process. So move to an army person is no problem, as long as part of the package is the support that you would expect. Decent education when you arrive in the new location, the families looked after, the chance of stability, a decent health package alongside, and what we're trying to enable here and to ensure here that that is delivered to the families.
And are you confident that you've got enough accommodation that is up to standard for these people to come home to?
I don't think we'd move without the staff checks being done to ensure that that happened. We also had the luxury, if you'd like to call it that, to moving to bases that already exist. So we know there is accommodation in the locations we're moving to. We know there's technical accommodation in the areas we're moving to. And because we're taking over in a number of locations from Royal Air Force bases, we know that the infrastructure is there in terms of schooling and hospitals to support those moves. And that's quite important right now, because we've announced moves today which in some aspects are slightly quicker and more advanced than we had previously been told. The reason that that's happening is, one, units have the opportunity to move as they leave their current locations, but two, to minimise the gaps from the RAF leaving bases and the Army arriving to ensure that those local services remain extant.
1,800 to come home by the middle of 2013, that still leaves just over 8,000 to bring home by 2015 on the target set by the government. Can that target still be met? Because it's only a small proportion announced so far.
I think what we've seen today is the precursor moves. We've reached the base camp, if you like, of Everest today. 1,800 out of an 8,000 target or whatever. Yes, you're right. There's an ambitious piece of work still to go. You can expect more announcements like this to happen over the next year or 2 years as we move towards that target. That is still very much the intent to deliver on the target set by ministers.
Major General Nick Pope speaking to James Hurst. Well, as we've heard, many personnel from 2 Royal Anglian are pleased at the prospect of returning to the regiment's roots in the east of England. RAF Cottesmore lies on the borders of Leicester, Lincolnshire, Rutland and Cambridgeshire. After months of uncertainty, it now has a future, and as Victoria Smith's been finding out, that comes as a relief to local people.
It may be quiet now, but the road into RAF Cottesmore will be getting a lot more busy over the next few years. The base itself is closing its doors to the RAF, who will have left completely by March. But from next summer, 620 staff and their families from 2 Royal Anglian will repopulate the base. In 2013, 450 personnel and their families from 7 Regiment RLC will join them. So 1,000 service personnel and their families will be leaving Germany and Cyprus to settle here at RAF Cottesmore, either inside the wire or out there in the Rutland countryside. It means the sound of Harriers flying overhead is no more, but new boots on the ground should make some noise of their own. That's the hope of those who live and work in the nearby village of Greetham.
I think the local shop will benefit, and obviously the local pubs. And there'll be some more activity in the housing market.
I think it's a good idea because it'll give more people work. And there's no work about, people have got no wages.
Local landlords used to serving up RAF lunches are looking forward to pulling pints for the soldiers.
It's definitely good for all the pubs and for ourselves in the village, just because it's gone quieter now with the RAF moving out and not flying anymore. So with the army coming in, it's definitely got to be a good thing for the village and for us.
It's hoped the new arrivals from Cyprus and Germany will fit in well and not ruffle too many feathers. Victoria Smith, Forces News, Rutland.